conversation about Spiritist, and we all wanted the same thing. A reflection of everything we had.
You like it? You like Spanish?
But it's happy.
Yeah.
But I understand.
Yes. Because I don't. Yeah, actually, that class is English.
And we thought of that reflection recently. This idea of world.
You have to
Realizing that the world is purified for
He respects, but
I know that.
so the idea of sending them to another world is not a gift.
Yeah, it's good.
And their punishment is to give them mercy and grace.
my kids are.
That's where you know.
It's from
Yes, for you
To
too.
be in a world.
That's right.
Book in Spanish. It's one of my favorite books.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so you made me think a lot about like how people go on and
It's because it's in
something that's on but blunder or pick up other crops.
I found it in the States. They have
all these
a lot of the books in
Oh,
Spanish.
that's good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. Yeah.
For sure. Okay, here we go. No, okay. Welcome everyone. So, I like picture. Yeah. I like to do that. So yeah, welcome everyone. We had a great afternoon yesterday. It was great to see so many of you there with us. We had a really lovely time and lots of food, lots of that home feeling, I guess, that we get from celebrating such an important holiday, not holiday, but a celebration that we have in Brazil. So it's great to see you there. And to start off today, I'll be reading a text from the book called Ceifa de Luz, or Harvest of Light. It's a book from Emmanuel. And it's one of those that he brings a passage from the gospel and then he writes a little interpretation. So this one is called Renewal in Love. And it's from a passage from Paul where he says, "And you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good." So Emmanuel brings us this interpretation. He says, "When crises visit you in the face of human problems, it is right to reflect on the principles of cause and effect, just as it is natural to consider the necessity of spiritual refinement with which we are confronted. However, also think about the law of renewal, capable of bringing us wonders of peace and victory over ourselves, if we decide to accept constructively the experiences that become necessary for us. If you have reached a deep integration with the blessings of life, consider the task the divine providence has entrusted to you. God does not send us problems we are not in need of. Acceptance and patience, without fleeing from work, are always almost half the success in any test to which we're subjected for our own benefit. If any moment is susceptible to being an opportunity for redemption and adjustment, every day is also an opportunity to begin again, relearn, teach, or rebuild. The love we add to the duty we're called to fulfill is always a planting of happiness for ourselves. Wherever you are and however you are in areas of difficulty, give yourself to serenity and the spirit of service, and you will easily understand that love truly covers the multitude of our faults, hastening in our favor the desired conquest of peace and liberation. So let us do a little prayer. I got this. Thank you. Let us do a little prayer. elevating our thoughts, our minds, to our guardian angels, to our Master Jesus, and finding a place in our minds of serenity, a place in our minds that bring us to the present. So we can take this next hour to learn about obedience and resignation, how we can feel those two virtues in our lives, what we can do to help us to be at peace. Master, we ask you that you guide all of us today, guiding our hearts, guiding our thoughts, as we start this conversation. May your love continue to surround us today and tomorrow. So be it.
So be it.
So, as you noticed, we have a new room. And we have kids now for the first time. So you can hear some of their joyfulness and the songs they'll be singing. This is our first try at it, and we're really happy with that new room. And we'll see how they feel about us being here and talking a lot as well. So we'll be likely doing some adjustments to help with the sound. But for today, this is what we have. And sorry. And today I chose to talk about obedience and resignation, because these are two virtues that are sometimes misunderstood. And so I invite you all to bring your comments or questions, especially because these are two words that might feel heavy for some of us, if not all of us. And to start getting our juices flowing, for us to start thinking about these two virtues, these two words, a couple of initial questions for us to think more reflectively, think about this from ourselves, would be the first one is, how do I understand obedience and resignation? What are those two words? What do they mean to me? Do they mean that is something very constrictive? Or do I see some freedom in them? And the second one is, do I see the role of obedience and resignation in my life? If I start to reflect about the things that I go through in life, the experiences, especially the ones that we're going through today, is there a place there for obedience or resignation? Is there an aspect of our lives that are like calling for some obedience, for some resignation? Simply for us to find if there are any parts of our lives that are in need of these. And once we find it in our minds, hopefully we can keep thinking about it throughout our talk today, and hopefully it'll shed some light and help. And the reason why I said these words sometimes might come as a heavy word is because it sometimes it triggers, especially when you talk about obedience, it might trigger a very defensive reaction. That obedience is something that, we must follow this, and we're not allowed to have a voice. We must obey. It might be something very restrictive. And today we're going to talk about it, so we can, if we have that idea of these words, of these virtues, then we can start to see it from a different perspective. So this book here, at the very end there, the Gospel According to Spiritism, that was the third book that Kardec wrote in as part of the 5 books from the Spiritist doctrine. In chapter 9, this is the chapter when he talks about blessed are the meek. And as you know, that book brings a lot of passages from Jesus, and then they go on to talk about it quite a bit. Kardec brings his own explanations and his own ideas, and then it's followed by a few messages from Spirit to again help us understand the gospel. In chapter 9, that's where he talks about when Jesus says, blessed are the meek and the peacemakers. Bem-aventurados os mansos e os pacificadores. And so there's a whole chapter that talks about this. And in that chapter is when the Spirit, his name is Lazarus, this is when he brings us a beautiful text, very short, only 3 paragraphs, that talks specifically about obedience and resignation. So he says, the doctrine of Jesus constantly teaches obedience and resignation, 2 virtues which are companions of kindness and activity. Although, and this is what I was talking about before, man wrongly confuses them with the denial of sentiment and denial of free will. So to some of us, if not to all of us, when we hear the words obedience and resignation, we might think that they refer to the denial of sentiment. For example, that I'm not allowed to feel, that I'm not allowed to have a voice, that I'm not allowed to express my feelings. So the denial of sentiment and also the denial of free will. Once there are rules in place, I have no free will. I must comply. I must be obedient to those sets of boundaries. So those are usually the connotations that we have, especially in modern society, how those words have come to change to how they mean, what they mean today. But Lazarus is telling us that is not the right connotation. Obedience and resignation it's very different from any of that we might think it truly is. He says, obedience is the consent of reason, and resignation is the consent of the heart. Might be a little tough to understand what that really means when we read it for the first time. But what do you think that means? Before I just talk forever. Obedience is the consent of reason. How does that sound? Does it make sense? Or does it confuse it even more? When you think about the consent of reason, we start to realize, and I'll give us some ideas. We start to realize that's when we start to see, especially the divine laws, as something that is reasonable. That's something that makes sense, that we understand. And because we understand, we want to follow. We're not being pressured to follow it. We're not being mandated to follow it. But we're following because I granted a consent from my reasoning. So I realize, I understand, and then I give the consent to myself to follow it. So it comes from within. It makes sense to me. And the difference here, sometimes we think, like I said before, sometimes we think about obedience as more of like a compliance perspective. For example, if a child obeys their parent because they fear punishment, that's more of like compliance. Obedience is when the child obeys the parent. They're still obeying the parent, but they understand why, right? So it makes sense for me to behave this way that my parents are telling me, because they know it's good for them. So that's the difference between compliance and obedience, meaning, again, the consent of reason. And to illustrate just a little bit more, it's very interesting when we look at the root of the word. When obedience, when the word was created, it comes from Latin. And if we divide it in two, the first part of the word ob means to pay attention. And then obedience has to do with sound, with the ability to hear. So obedience truly means, like when the word was created back in the day, it means to listen with attention. So it has nothing to do with complying with some rules, but rather listen with attention. So get curious and understand the divine laws, for example, basically giving that consent of reason. So again, it's very interesting, right? It's hear with attention. It's nothing to do with the connotation that we might give it nowadays. And then resignation is the consent of the heart. That might be even more subjective to understand. What do you think? Any thoughts?
They're both getting you an idea of voluntariness. It goes back to what you were talking about the idea of compliance, which is it's a great word because there's a sense of obligation.
Yeah.
And almost like command to do. Whereas when both of these touch on the idea of consent, a consent is something that you offer voluntarily or by choice. And in terms of resignation, it's the consent of the heart, rather than you just having to kind of bite your tongue at a situation that you don't really like, which is oftentimes how we look at resignation, at least in English today. It's just kind of a forced acquiescence. This is more of just you embrace it, you embrace what is happening in the recognition of something more. And in this case, that something more is a feeling of an underlying goodness, of an underlying fit that exists as a result of it, at the end of the day, coming from God.
Thank you. That was beautifully put, especially the part about when you talked about the consent is it's something voluntary, right? We have the idea that it might be something that must comply by, that we have no choice, but it's actually quite the opposite. It truly shows that we have the option to give that consent, and resignation, the consent of the heart, is when it truly makes sense in our hearts and we're accepting something because we truly feel that it's something that can help us undergo whatever it is that we might be going through. It helps us truly understand the lesson that aspect of our lives can give to us when we truly feel it. And we'll talk more about it throughout the talk today to shed a little bit more light into what it means. So in a sense, obedience is understanding, and resignation would be accepting.
I don't know why my brain goes to the idea of the consent and the reason and the heart. I kind of divided it as my thoughts and my feelings. And if I consent for my logic process to think that way, it means that I chose to be one with God, and God in that moment, that time, it was changing lanes. He would understand that it's okay for someone that is going faster to just go through first. It's like you have your thoughts closest to the feeling of unity.
Yes.
And the heart for me is the feelings. You were just used to feel that way. You got used to feel like we're all just passing through here. So I consent for my thoughts to think like God, and I consent to my heart to just feel like God.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Exactly. And we'll talk exactly about what you said in a couple of slides when we talk about our will. And when we're thinking about, what is it for me to obey, right? If I'm talking about understanding something, what is it that I need to understand, or what am I invited to understand? And this to us brings to a question that we actually talked about a month ago. We talked about discipline here. And I brought this question again, and just to see if we remember or maybe understand. Do you guys remember what this question is when Kardec asks in the Spirit's book? He asks, what is natural law? Do any of you remember a little bit of what the answer has to say? there's no cheating on it. It talks about natural law or divine law, but what's the essence of that answer? What do you think?
Maybe the law of God,
Mm-hmm.
what is in our conscience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the God's law. Now, there's the important piece here is that it alone ensures the happiness of human beings. It shows them what they should and should not do, and that they only suffer when they deviate from it. So this is when the obedience comes into play. As we start to understand the divine laws, we give that consent of reason to the divine laws. We realize that I'm not following the divine laws because I must comply with God because God is going to be offended if I don't. That's not it. It's the fact that if I follow the divine laws, I will be better off. I will feel happiness. My conscience will approve of my actions the more I follow the divine laws. So you can see it's something, it's all internal. It's when I choose to obey the divine laws, I will get the benefit from it. Because as I deviate from it, that's when suffering starts. And so we start to realize that obedience is not a constraint to our free will. Obedience is choosing how we're going to be using our free will. And the divine laws is a great guidance that can help us choose how we behave. And so is resignation. Resignation also comes into play here, right? As we start to look at the things that happen in our lives, we start to accept them, the more we can see the divine laws kind of playing chess with our lives. As we start to, let's say we have a trialing family member or a trialing person at work, when we start to bring in the divine laws, for example, the law of, let's say, humility, of love, of society even, realize that we live in a society. There's going to be people that are different from us. As soon as we start to bring these divine laws to that situation, we start to accept, because we see those situations as an opportunity for us to develop our humility, for us to develop our love, for us to develop our compassion. As we see it as an opportunity, we start to accept it. And here we're going to spend a few minutes, and it's a book that I didn't know. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I watched a few talks from a person called Artur Valadares in Brazil. He gives really good talks, and that's where I extracted most of the material to give this talk. And he mentions a book called Passos da Vida, or Steps of Life. And in that little book by Chico Xavier, there's a text from this spirit called Albino Teixeira, and it's really interesting. He says, it's a very tactical book. It talks about very specific things about our lives. And this text is called What We Suffer From the Most. Então, o que mais sofremos, né? Do que mais sofremos. And then he's going to give us about 10 sentences, and we'll get to reflect about them. And I'm curious to hear what you have to say. So he starts with, what we suffer from the most in the world is not the difficulty itself. It's not a difficulty from that trial itself. It is the discouragement in overcoming. So we don't suffer because something that we're going through in life is difficult, because that happens. What we suffer from is our discouragement from overcoming. Em português, a gente não sofre com a dificuldade de algo, mas é o desânimo em superá-la que nos traz o sofrimento. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the difficulty. Yeah.
It's a lot of sense.
Because it's a strange translation, you know what I mean?
Yes. That's why I have the Portuguese cheat sheet here. 'Cause I know it means more in Portuguese. So, não é a dificuldade em si, mas sim o desânimo em superá-la. The next one. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not the difficulty itself, right? It's not the aspect of how hard or how easy something is, but rather how willing or how motivated we are to overcome it. And why wouldn't we feel encouraged? So why would we feel desánimo? Right? It could be something around the fact that I think I don't deserve, or because I don't think I'm capable of, I don't have the courage to overcome it, because we know that God wouldn't give us anything more than what we can overcome. So if we choose not to act because it's too difficult, and it's not because we're not capable, but it's because we don't believe we can do it.
I don't think there's a word for that in English.
Which one?
Desánimo.
Desánimo. Yeah.
Desánimo, and it's no animated. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I cannot make myself have no energy. Desánimo. No wish for.
Yeah. There's some words in Portuguese that you have to explain it. There's no direct
There's
translation.
no wish.
Yeah.
What about if you feel disengaged?
Disengage. Okay, yeah.
How about that?
Disheartened.
Just
Yeah.
Lack of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just like, that probably works. Disheartened.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mind you, as I was reflecting on this and what you were saying, Victor, maybe a beauty of the way God set it up is when you remove the first one,
Mhm.
it maybe even has like when you remove the second sentence
Mhm.
as an issue, it maybe even removes the first one, because as soon as you overcome using the very words of the discouragement and you let that go,
Yeah.
does that completely change the way we perceive it and even the difficulty of the other one? So it's almost like you overcome the discouragement, you also overcome the idea of difficulty, and it becomes an easy thing to do or just a natural thing that you're going to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's our vision will change when we're discouraged. We keep seeing the obstacles, and that's all we see. Right? The minute we're no longer discouraged, but we're encouraged, we know we can do it. The obstacles, they're pretty small, and we're focused on the outcome, the solution. Right? The obstacles are just rocks in the way. Right? Thank you.
I have a thought here.
Yeah.
Isn't it possible that we are being discouraged or disengaged or having a lack of enthusiasm due to the presence of some of these obsessors surrounding us, telling us or whispering in our ears not to follow, not to overcome that problem? Could be it, and if so, wouldn't be the prayers? I mean, the being more engaged in prayers with sincerity, a way to overcome this lack of disengagement, don't you think?
Yeah, I was going to bring this at the end, but let's talk about it now.
Yeah, I read
it's,
it. Sorry.
No, this is good.
I target your
As we'll see, we're going to go through 10 sentences. As we'll see, we'll realize that the reason for the suffering, it's not the obstacle itself, it's not the situation itself, but it's how we think of it, right? And what could be driving us to think about a situation that we don't feel encouragement, that we feel despair, and so on and so forth. There are many things that could influence us to think that we're not good enough, that we won't be able to accomplish something. There are many influences, one of them being spiritual obsessors, absolutely. The same way we have people incarnated that do the same to us. But those are all influences. The choice is still ours. So they're not out there for us to blame, but as if we do feel that we're being obsessed, for example, that's an indication for me to change our behavior. Once I change my behavior, that obsession ceases to exist. Right? So we're never blaming it on someone else. We're certainly suffering the influence, but it's our choice to succumb to that influence or to look the other way.
Especially because I think that when you have an obsessor, it's because some way you allow that to happen with your thought frequency, right?
Exactly. The minute you start, like you said, praying, focusing our thoughts in things that are very constructive versus destructive, we start to change our attunement. We start to change also sintonia, right? And that, like you said, Marty, that kind of pushes the obsession away. It ceases to exist. So the second one is, it is not the trial that makes us suffer. Não é a provação que nos faz sofrer, but it is the despair in the face of suffering. É o desespero diante do sofrimento. So it's not the trial itself, but it's the despair that we feel towards suffering. So again, it's not the situation, but it's how we feel, how we see it. The third one is, it's not the illness that makes us suffer, but is the dread of receiving it. Não é a doença, mas é o pavor em recebê-la. Just think about how anxious we get, or how much we think about just the idea of getting ill versus the illness itself. Then it's not the unhappy relative, it is the resentment of having them in the family circle. I found that this one was interesting. I guess that hit a nerve.
We all
Right?
I think we all can relate.
Yes. There you go. Então, a gente não sofre por causa daquele parente infeliz. Mas é a mágoa de tê-lo na nossa família. So it's not the relative itself, but it's how we perceive that relative. Right? We might think in our minds, that person has nothing to do with our family. What are they doing here? Well, especially if it's family, there's a very important reason why they're there. Right? And that is to teach us something. So it's not the relative, but it's how we feel about it. It's not the failure itself, não é o fracasso em si, but it's the stubbornness of not recognizing one's own mistakes. So it's not, não é o fracasso em si, mas é a nossa teimosia de não reconhecer os nossos próprios erros. The failure might have happened, but if we look at the failure and we observe it and we analyze it and we realize what we did that we shouldn't have done, and then we learn from it, we no longer suffer from it. But if we ignore and we don't recognize our own mistakes, that failure will bring us suffering. And then there's a few others. The next one is, it's not the ingratitude. Não é a nossa ingratidão que nos faz sofrer, but it's our incapacity or inability to love without selfishness. Não é a ingratidão, mas a nossa incapacidade de amar sem egoísmo. In other words, when I do something good for someone, right? When I give out, I pour my heart out, I give my time, I give words, and I don't get anything back, right? That person, instead of thanking me, actually might curse at me or might remove them from my life. And why am I suffering from that? It's because I was expecting something in return. It's because I'm still unable to love without selfishness. The minute we start to love unconditionally, as we say, not expecting anything back, we'll never suffer from ingratitude again. The minute we don't expect something back, anything that we do, if we don't receive anything in return, that's okay. It won't cause us any suffering. I like this one too. It is not one's own insignificance that makes us suffer, but is the rebellion against the superiority of others. Não, o que me faz sofrer não é a própria pequenez, mas é a revolta contra a superioridade dos outros. So it's not about how small or how big we are, but it's how much we let others influence how we feel about ourselves. Inveja. Right? It's not jealousy.
Envy.
Envy, thank you. Envy, in other words. Right? It's that idea of my happiness is only possible if someone else is not as happy as I am. The analogy that I thought about is pretty poor, I apologize. But if you give a little bowl of ice cream to a little kid, they're going to be super happy, they're going to be super content, and then their brother's next to them, and the brother gets another bowl of ice cream, but that one has an extra ball. So it's a bigger ice cream. I'm instantly not happy anymore because I saw how much the other one received. So nothing changed. I'm still happy with what I have, but it's because I'm so concerned about how others are living their lives, and that impacts us. Papai.
Sorry.
Not at all.
Hi, Daddy.
I just talked about kids. And then the other one is not the insult, but the wounded pride. Não é um insulto, não é injúria que nos faz sofrer, mas é o nosso orgulho ferido. This is when someone, let's say, curses us or say something that's not right about us, and we take offense on that, right? We only take offense because we let it, because we have a wounded pride, like you say, because nós temos orgulho ferido, right? Because if we don't have wounded pride, they can say whatever they want about us, it won't affect us, right? So it only affects us because of our wounded pride. It is not the temptation itself, but it is the lust to experience his suggestions. I'm reading in Português. Não é a tentação que nos faz sofrer, mas sim a volúpia de experimentar-lhes os alvitres, ou os... qual seria uma palavra? As sugestões que aquela tentação nos está trazendo. So it's not the temptation itself, but our desire to experience what it can give. For example, it's not a temptation, again, a very rude example, but it's not the temptation of alcohol, but it's the lust to experience all the good that I might feel when I drink. Right. The next one is not the aging body that makes us suffer as we start to age, but it's the passion for appearances that makes us suffer. Então não é a velhice do corpo que nos faz sofrer, mas sim a paixão pelas aparências. And that's what brings us the suffering piece. And to end it, as it is easy to perceive, so é óbvio, né? In the solution of any problem, the worst problem is the burden of afflictions that we create, that we develop, and that we sustain against ourselves. So as we noticed, it's not the thing that's happening to us that brings us suffering, but it's how we perceive it, it's how we deal with it. And the beauty of it is that is a choice. What's happening to me might not. It just happened. But it's how I see it, how I perceive it, that is our choice. Especially because the aspects are usually already in the past. So an accident that happened, someone was rude to me, that's already in the past. But how I perceive it is what I can choose, and that's what will help me stop any suffering that I might have. Let's see. Make sense? And then, and this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about what you said. And then we start thinking about, okay, so what do I do then to help me not suffer? You know, to choose the path that's not going to cause me suffering, but it's actually going to bring me some consolation. And this Astud makes a very interesting reflection about our will, nossa vontade. Whose will prevails in my life? A vontade de quem que leva a minha vida? And to explain this, we can go back to the Genesis. So from the Old Testament, Genesis 1-3, we have the passage that explains about the history from Adam and Eve. And to sum it up, we're running out of time a little. So to sum it up, Adam's story was around him having his own will, God showing him the divine laws, but Adam looking at God and saying, no, I choose my own will, and so I'll act this way. And then we know what happened, right? He chose not to follow God's will and decided to follow his own. That is what's the word? Exemplification of pride, right? No, I know better, so I'm going to do it this way. And we know what happened with Adam. And then fast forward to Jesus. It's really interesting when we think about Jesus and the fact that he was a pure spirit. He knew about everything on earth, right? He helped create earth. Yet, throughout his time, he would always say that the will of God be done. He will never impose his will. Even though his will was so divine and so pure that was almost the same as God's will, he never imposed his own pride, his own will. He would always look up to God. So Emmanuel, in the book Follow Me, he says, all human suffering in general originates from the pretension to invade the divine power. So all our suffering, todo o nosso sofrimento, all our suffering in general comes from when we want to be bigger than God, when we want our will to prevail, not God. Pride, vanity, foolishness, selfishness, wickedness, rebellion, and oppression represent only varied forms of this unlawful invasion, right? Invading the will of God. We have here, this is the spirit Sheila, again through the mediumship of Francisco Cândido Xavier. She says, let us never forget that Jesus became the divine master and sovereign of souls, not only because he came into this world, celebrated by the songs of the celestial legions, but also because he transformed his very life and his apostolate of love into a hymn of humility, constantly obeying the will of God. So like I said before, Jesus, right, that was all of these things. He was always humble and he was always obeying the will of God. He never tried to be bigger than God. So who are we, right, to think that we have the ability to be bigger than God? And what does it mean even? Right? Because Jesus taught us when he taught us to pray, right? In the Lord's Prayer, the Pai Nosso, he said, thy will be done. A sua vontade seja feita, right? So that the will of God be done, not my own. Because my own is still very driven, unfortunately, by our pride, right? By us wanting to be gods. Whereas Jesus, as his example of humility that he was always looking up to God, not himself. So this starts to show us a little bit about why sometimes we suffer, right? It's because we're letting our will be bigger than what it should.
Maybe the additional question that might be illuminating here is, as you said, who are we to want to take over essentially for what God is doing? But maybe the other question is, why would we even want to? How would we possibly, I speak for myself, I can't possibly imagine how I could do it better than God. So when I really think, even if I had the best day of my life and I'm like firing at all cylinders, I can't possibly imagine I could do it better than God. So whatever is happening, if it really is just built to be as perfectly satisfying for me and everybody as possible, why would I even want to? And then it goes back to what you're saying, that consent. And if that's true, then it goes back to the obedience and resignation.
Exactly. Thank you, Attila. That's exactly it. That's the summary of this slide is exactly that. So how do we follow the will of God? Obedience and serenity. Those are two aspects, two virtues that will help us do that. Obedience, right? Understanding the will of God through the divine laws. And resignation is accepting the will of God, accepting the things that happen in our lives. Now, when we say accepting the things that happen in our lives, does that mean I'm just going to sit and watch them? No, right? But sometimes it feels that way when you see the word resignation. It's like, oh, I'm just going to accept everything as is. I'm going to sit back and relax and let everything unfold. And that's usually one of the excuses that we give when someone, let's say I'm going through something and someone tells me, oh, we should apply some resignation. And then usually the first excuse is, well, no, but I can't just not do anything. I have to do something. I have to fix it. And Emmanuel thought about that and brought to us two very important passages that I didn't know. One of them I've already read in the beginning. So is it about doing nothing? Right? Are obedience and resignation passive virtues? And that's where Emmanuel is going to bring us a very interesting piece that I think, to me at least, helped a lot. He said, acceptance and patience without fleeing from work. So accepting and patience, not disengaging from the work, right? Still realizing we have to work. We have to do something about that situation in our lives. Are almost always half the success in any tests to which we are subjected to for our own benefit. And to me, this was mind-blowing. I hope it is to you as well. Emmanuel is telling us that acceptance and patience is almost half of the effort we have to do to reach success in the tests that we're going through in life. It's almost half, right? So when we're dealing with something in our lives that is trialing, that is hard, half of the effort will come from just accepting and being patient about it.
What about the other half?
That's the word.
Yes.
That's the word.
Tell me.
But the beauty of it is that if we don't think about it this way, the entire thing is work. And that's when the, what's the word that you guys didn't like? The discouragement comes in.
Yeah.
Right? It's when we see that everything is the work, the mountain is heaped, comes discouragement. Emmanuel is telling us that when we accept, and we have that resignation, when we accept and we have that patience, half of the work is already done. Now we have the other half, right? Because we have to learn something, right? So the work comes as well. And that's why resignation has nothing to do with not working, but working smarter. And in another book, Emmanuel says constructive acceptance will always be, and Emmanuel, he doesn't use words like never, like always, very often. But in this case, he chose to. He said constructive acceptance, meaning accepting again with the idea that we're going to have to work as well. So constructive acceptance will always be, and now he's pushing the boundaries. He's saying perhaps even more than half of the ingredients for solving any. It's not a problem with the family, it's not a problem at work, it's not a problem in the community, it's not a problem with friends. No, any of the problems that may afflict you. And we say constructive because it is not a matter of inner calm, right? But rather patience capable of improvising goodness, creating conditions for good to become increasingly broader for all those who share life with us. So, again, I want to focus on the first sentence that I think is a huge consolation that we might get, especially if we're going through something difficult in our lives. Realizing that just accepting it will already remove 50% of that burden. It will already remove 50% of that effort. Is huge. And then you might ask, well, what does that mean to accept? Right? Is to accept that we're going through what we're going through for a reason. There is an opportunity there for us to learn something, for us to reflect about it. And once we accept it, it's like all that pride that we had that was clouding our judgment, that was bringing us the indecision. How am I going to work this? This is too hard. I try this way, it doesn't work. I try that way, it doesn't work either. All those obstacles, every time I try something, it feels like it doesn't work. There's always an obstacle, right? All those will go away once we accept, and then we'll be able to see what we truly need to do. What we truly is under our control to make us overcome that difficult or not as difficult part of our lives. So again, I just wanted to leave you with this message about acceptance and how it's almost half, or if not more than half of what we need. And then the other half is also the work that we have to do. But it's not about fighting with it. It's about accepting it and then working towards it. So this is Emmanuel saying, didn't create this, and we know he's quite wise. So I think it's very important to keep this in mind.
Maybe it becomes really easy too once you accept that, or once you play this out. And maybe if you could read between the lines a little bit, as you said, if Emmanuel is becoming very absolute in his commentary and chipping away at the idea of what side of the 50% it's on. If you look at the most perfect example of this, which according to the Spirit's book is Jesus, what happened when you live that way. And one of the stories in the it is a story in the Bible that I love is when the disciples are all stressed out about where they're going to have the Last Supper because they just went to Jerusalem. They don't know anybody. Nobody likes them. They don't know where they're going to eat. And Jesus literally says, don't worry about it. And he sends two disciples. I don't think they specify exactly which two. He said, just go walk down the street, go turn left here, turn right here, wait at this well for some boy to show up, and then tell him who you are and that you need a place to eat. And then literally these two disciples in disbelief do it. And they just wait around and they ask, and the kid literally takes them to a room that's already set up. It's already been prepared. Some people say that was Mark who wrote the gospel, but that doesn't matter. The point is that they found a place to eat with practically no work, and all they had to do was accept that there's some sort of there's a plan and just allow it to play out.
Thank you. Exactly. That speaks to the faith and the confidence in God as well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Thank you very much. And it's already 12. I was going to talk about the story of Mary, but that's next time. I'll just leave this slide on. Okay. So, thank you all. We're going to do a little prayer for us to to get ourselves ready for our passes, which now happen on this room on the side. I don't remember how to ask for the kids to come. Sorry, I think I did.
The logistics changed.
Well, not today. Today is just us. They're not ready yet, so. Thank you all. Yeah, and let's do a prayer. Yeah. Thank you. So let us take a deep breath. Now think our thoughts, our feelings. And bringing to our minds the idea of obedience, of understanding the divine laws, and the idea of resignation. To accept our past, our present, and our future. Deep down, feeling and understanding how those can make half of our suffering or all of our suffering go away. We can think about one aspect of our lives that seems difficult at the time. And just think about the word acceptance. Acceptance. Like a drop of water surrounding that difficult moment, watching it, caring for it, and now seeing with clear eyes as a divine opportunity. We thank you, Master, for our guidance. We thank you, Master, for our love. We thank Emmanuel for his kind words. Let me ask our guardian angels to help us on our journey to develop these virtues that only bring us happiness. May the Lord's love surround us, bringing us peace of mind and comfort. So be it. So now we're going to go to our passes, and it looks like the kids are done as well. So I'm going to leave the music here. You can stay in this level of serenity, and we'll invite you to come to the passes as we go. Thank you. Amen.